Welcome to the Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Samueli, and it is now 9:10 p.m. here in Budapest. I'm really sorry I'm late. I was doing an interview for on the topic of Julian Assange, which we'll obviously talk about now. Um, I'm a little late, but by my standards, it's not that bad. Um, the grimness that one has to conclude, like it's June the 25th. So the days are already getting noticeably shorter. I mean, I know somebody say, "Oh, don't worry about anything," So it's getting shorter. We're past the midsummer night, and we're now heading towards the grim, short days of winter. And no one can now say, "Oh, well, what are you getting so upset about?" Well, that's what I'm getting upset about. Anyway, welcome everybody who has joined me. I really appreciate it. And I mean, obviously the question of Assange, I have to say, did catch me by surprise, because I was sure that they were going to let him die in prison. That they were just going to spin this out. There'd be one appeal after another. Maybe eventually he'd be extradited to the U.S., but then there'd be motion after motion after motion. It would never actually go to trial, and he would just simply die without the case ever really coming to a conclusion. So the release of Assange did catch me by surprise. I mean, I'd read about the negotiations that had been taking place, but I never really thought that those negotiations would ever amount to very much. That they would just simply, take up everybody's time. So obviously, this is extraordinary news. And then Ray J says Biden debate talking point. That's my read as well, because I think that's what this is about. As long as this Assange case, was there, unresolved, it was a net negative for Biden, because there were obviously many libertarians unattached, not particularly committed to either of the two main parties, but they are very committed on that issue of Julian Assange. And Biden did it, and that may tempt them to vote for Biden, or may tempt them not to vote for Trump. And it may tempt people even to go to the polls. They had no intention of voting, but they might decide to vote. And essentially, he goes in onto the debate stage on Thursday, and he will say, "Yeah, I did it. I did it. I decided it was best for the country to move on." And the issue that should have worked for Trump, it should have been Trump's issue. He should have embraced, because he would have said, Julian Assange was against the deep state. He exposed all the crimes of the FBI, the CIA, and so on. Just as I would have done. Assange and I, we're on the same wavelength. I mean, not quite, that in that way, but this would have been a good issue for Trump. He's now lost this issue, because now it's a Biden's issue. Biden said, "Well, yeah, I did it." And who's going to criticize Biden for doing it? Well, you've got all, Mike Pence, the totally discredited figure, hated and detested by Democrats and Republicans alike. So a criticism from Pence isn't going to hurt Biden. But most important, the various kind of radicals within the Democratic Party who are not happy with what Biden is doing on Israel and Gaza will be able to turn around and say, "Hey, but he's done this for journalistic freedom. He's released this person. That'll keep some, the AOCs happy, the people who would vote for the AOC, and Trump has lost an issue. This should have been an issue. He should have gone after, he could have gone after Biden on this. He didn't do it, and that's a big, big, big failure on Trump's part. And shows that he's ultimately, for all his big talk about the deep state, his heart was never really in it to take on the deep state. And so I think this is a net positive for Biden. In terms of, are there many people in America who care about Julian Assange or who even know who Julian Assange is? No, there aren't. On the other hand, there are a lot of people, who feel very strongly about Assange. And in a close election where it's going to be decided by a handful of votes in a few battleground states, that could be the difference. You're talking about a few thousand votes in battleground states. That's going to work for Biden's advantage. There are no net negatives for Biden. I mean, there might be some discontent within the FBI or whatever in the CIA, but so what? That doesn't hurt him. But as electoral politics, I think it's very smart. And Trump has now lost an issue, and that's, I think, a problem for him, because what he's really trying to do is he's trying to coast. Always a bad idea, in politics. Don't ever try coasting, because you're not gonna make it, particularly in an election that is obviously going to be a tight race. And as we've discussed before, Ukraine should be an issue for Trump. He should be saying, "Yeah, we're being dragged into World War III with Russia, and it's catastrophic. And I'm going to bring this war to an immediate conclusion." Now, when you say, "I'm going to bring this war to an immediate conclusion," the only meaning you can draw from that money is that you are going to cut off Ukraine. That was the understanding that Viktor Orban came away with from his meeting with Trump, that you are going to cut off Ukraine. In other words, that's it. No more arms, no more aid. You're going to have to settle this with Russia. We're not going to risk the destruction of our country for your sake, for your borders. That would be my understanding. But if however, like that disgusting Sebastian Gorka, Dr. Sebastian Gorka, who says, "Yeah, well, Trump's going to, send, 10 times more military hardware to Ukraine than Biden did," then of course the war is not going to come to an end. And then, just in terms of political calculation, that it becomes Trump's war. And we know with the Democrats, the Democrats are absolutely ruthless the way they play their politics. So if this war, goes on into a possible Trump administration, and it intensifies, and the dangers of direct confrontation between the United States and Russia grow substantially, well, what are the Democrats going to do? Well, the Democrats are going to say, this is Trump's war. Trump is dragging us into World War III. Trump is an absolute menace. Trump's is threatening the security of the United States. It's going to be that quick with the Democrats. They're going to basically say, yeah, it is Trump's war. Now, the way Trump could have got around this is essentially committing himself to peace. Ukraine should have been his issue. It was a wide open lane for him. So, yep, that's it. This is Biden's war. There was no need for it. But he doesn't. He didn't do that. He's still boasting about sending the bloody Javelin missiles to Ukraine. In other words, what he did to escalate this war. So he's lost the Ukraine issue, and I think he's lost the Assange issue. He's also lost the vax issue, because the vaccine should have been again his issue. Yeah, it's true that he promoted the vaccine. However, he could say, look, I was under a lot of pressure. In retrospect, I don't think his vaccines were very good. And in fact, they weren't even vaccines at all. And that's not really the way to deal with a public health issue. We've been dealing with viruses since humanity came into existence, and we've always known how to deal with viruses. There's something called herd immunity, the natural immunity. There was never any need to rush this gene manipulation to market and then force people to take this. So he hasn't got that issue. That's why I think, for Biden, this was a good, very smart move. And again, it shows the way the Democrats think politically in the way that Republicans don't, in the way that Trump doesn't. It would never occur to Trump. Trump in 2020, admittedly, he did toy with the idea of pardoning Assange in the last days of his administration. But of course, at that time, he was facing impeachment, and he couldn't do it because then, he couldn't afford to lose the votes of Lindsey Graham and the rest of them. And he would have been tried, convicted by the Senate. And then, of course, once he's convicted by the Senate, then he's absolutely open to criminal prosecution. But he could have pardoned Assange long before that, so it wouldn't have to be in that last few days of his administration. So he kind of is lost that issue, and I think again, as I say, that's how the Democrats play. They think politically, and Republicans, including Trump, do not. Anyway, let's take a look at some things that people are talking about. The Gagglers are raising. So let me go this on back on the locals page, and then Cynthia. Always good to see you, Cynthia. And Cynthia says, yesterday when someone said you look like a music teacher, George, you seemed Chihuahuas more or less pleased with the description of yourself. So I must have been thinking along similar lines some time ago when I said that you look a lot like Jimmy Page. See below. He's not a music teacher, but he's still quite musical. He also got all the girls. That should account for something, shouldn't it? The funny thing is that somebody else told me some time ago that I looked like Jimmy Page, but I myself don't quite see it. And I just wonder whether people say Jimmy Page because he sounds a little bit like me, or he talks a little like me. But yeah, thank you for that. I mean, the reason I say music teacher, because I always, you think of music teacher, you think somebody who looks like Beethoven, with this with the wild hair and that ferocious look in his face, and you thought of this deep tempestuous feelings that were bubbling inside Beethoven. At least that's, when you look at the paintings of Beethoven, he always looked like that he's suffering from some profound sorrows, and profound thoughts are coursing through his brain, and so on. And that's how you always think of music teacher. Any music teachers, it's kind of it tries to look like Beethoven. So, but thank you, Cynthia. And then Cynthia goes on, and below is a picture of Rocky Mountain High. Peter, good thing he didn't go down in a homemade aircraft, as singer-songwriter John Denver did in 1997. Otherwise, Johnny Apple and the rest of the fearless crew of Chihuahuas would be homeless and boneless today. Yeah, it's funny. Now that when I'm now looking at that picture, Cynthia, I can see the resemblance between John Denver and Peter. I didn't think of it because I never thought actually that John Denver wore glasses. So I don't know, for some reason I didn't think he wore glasses, but now that I see that picture with him wearing the glasses, I can see why people might have thought, oh, Peter, you look like John Denver. Yeah, no, but I can see that. But I think somebody said that yeah, in a facetious way. Well, I really think George looks like Errol Flynn, and while I think that was a yeah, as I say, facetious comment, I'll go with that. Say, yeah, Errol Flynn. But no, I don't think I look much like Errol Flynn. But however, when you look at some of those great Hollywood stars of old, Errol Flynn, Tyrone Power, Robert Taylor. I mean, Cynthia, all these people. They're all extremely handsome, but for some reason they also died very young. I think that it's quite very, very odd that all those actors, I think they all died in their 40s. So anyway, Judy Hotchkiss, welcome, Judy. And Judy says, Sundance Last Refuge has a cynical take on Assange. And the quote, it would not surprise me to see Assange creating videos where he demands the arrest of horrible Donald Trump while pitching the opportunity to attend lavish WikiLeaks fundraising dinners with honorees AOC, Christopher Steele, Andrew Weissman. Prepare your mindset accordingly. Let me read that again. It would not surprise me to see Assange creating videos where he demands the arrest of horrible Donald Trump while pitching the opportunity to attend lavish WikiLeaks fundraising dinners with honorees AOC, Christopher Steele, and Andrew Weissman. I don't know. That just seems mind-boggling. I find it difficult to believe that that he will do this. That Assange would do this. I mean, Assange has never really dealt with party politics in such a crude way. I mean, I know he obviously released those the DNC emails in 2016, but the thing was that that was information that came his way, and the information that came his way was really about what was done to Bernie Sanders. I mean, it had nothing to do with Donald Trump. I mean, that's why the whole thing has always been so ridiculous, that somehow, the Russians were trying to help Donald Trump. They had nothing to do with Donald Trump. I mean, those emails, they were about how the Democratic Party had screwed over Bernie Sanders. And that's why the most plausible source of those emails was Seth Rich, because it had to be somebody who was very distressed about what was done to Bernie Sanders. So I'm just surprised that about this tweet. I also I find it hard to believe that AOC, um, Christopher Steele or Andrew Weissman would join hands with WikiLeaks and Assange, because as far as they're concerned, um, WikiLeaks cost them the 2016 election. I mean, they're still very, very bitter about that. Certainly, Andrew Weissman is. Christopher Steele would be. I find it hard to believe that they would go, join forces with Julian Assange. I don't know. I mean, it seems to be like creative thinking, but I don't see this. Um, with Assange. I mean, there's also in a way the intriguing aspect of it is, will Assange, after all these years, disclose the source of those DNC leaks? Will he finally tell us where did that information come from? And then, of course, the John Podesta emails. Will he tell us where they go? I mean, remember, no, all of this time, we had this whole, and the media is still running with this thing about how the Russians hacked the DNC server and they passed on this information to WikiLeaks. That was the claim made by Mahler, and then the media have been repeating it ad nauseum ever since. And then, of course, we know from the House Intelligence Committee hearings that, in fact, that organization, the one that did supposedly the investigation of the DNC server, said we don't have any evidence that the Russians hacked it. I mean, they just simply said that well, it's kind of thing the Russians would do, and it's similar to what other things that Russia have done, but there was never any evidence of this. And even so, they've gone on repeating this. And of course, Mahler, during his investigation about Trump-Russia collusion, pointedly refused to go and interview Julian Assange, somebody who would have cleared the whole matter up then and then. So it's very interesting if Assange will finally disclose the source of this information. And of course, if he does that, that's going to be very upsetting to the likes of AOC and Christopher Steele and Andrew Weissman, all of whom, not so much AOC, but particularly Steele and Weissman, were Russiagaters. I mean, the whole thing was Russiagate. So part and parcel of Russiagate was WikiLeaks. That WikiLeaks was, at the heart of it, getting information from the GRU and then releasing this information in order to help Trump. So the Russians gave it to WikiLeaks. They did it in order to help Trump. That was the Mueller report. That was the claim made by that intelligence community assessment in January 2017. Oh yeah, this is all done by the Russians in order to help Trump, and so WikiLeaks was at the center of it. Now Assange has said nothing all this time, and of course everyone made sure that they didn't ask Assange that question. But he may now come clean. There's no reason why he shouldn't. And I think I think he will disclose that Seth Rich was the source of that of those leaks. I don't know about the Podesta, but the DNC hack was Seth Rich, and that's just going to blow the whole Russiagate thing out of the water. So I just have my doubts that that's the way it's going to go. Now, I don't think there's any. I don't think WikiLeaks cares very much about Trump. It was after all Trump's DOJ that went after Assange, indicted Assange, but at the same time, I mean, Assange is looking for a pardon. Yeah, he pleaded guilty to this felony, but his goal is to get a pardon, and I think he's going to want to, I mean, if Trump is elected, then he's going to want a pardon from Trump. If Trump isn't elected and Biden remains president, then why bother going after Trump? Trump will just be, that's it. Yesterday's news. I mean, I mean, you only go after Trump because Trump is still a major figure. But at this stage, I don't think he's going to want to do anything to antagonize Trump if he's still looking for a pardon. And Stella Assange has said that the goal is to seek a pardon. Anyway, thank you very much, Judy. Thank you for your generosity. Cynthia, RE last night's film. I know that Redford character is based on JFK, but I only brought up Nixon because the film was obviously making fun of him, just like it did to Senator Crocker Jarman and all other Republican politicians. Yes, that's why Jimmy Stewart turned down the role of Crocker, which leads me to believe that the film is actually a propaganda film to promote the Democratic Party, i.e. the new cool hip party running against the stodgy old GOP. Well, that's what you're saying is really interesting, because that's what you would think the theme is. Because you're right. That figure of Crocker Jarman is he's presented as boring, pompous, a glad hander, and just simply somebody who's got his hand in the till, and he spouts cliches. Obviously, the kind of cliches that he was spouting were very much the sort of fuddy-duddy, old-fashioned stuff that were constantly being made fun of in the 1960s. Well, we worked so hard, in the during the Great Depression, and we didn't even have a social worker, and the whole thing. It's kind of, there was just, these were just easy targets that was very fashionable then in the 60s. So you're absolutely right, and on that. However, the presentation of the Redford character is very, very unflattering, because he is, you're absolutely right, he's a the kind of new politician. He's sort of young and cool and hip, and he's a community activist, and relates to young people and to minorities, and he's no longer that sort of old-fashioned politician. So it's like when you had that dinner, you saw some of the old fuddy-duddy guys. You saw Hubert Humphrey, you saw George McGovern. But at the same time, the film presents him as an entirely empty, vacuous character. There's just nothing to him at all. Whatever little idealism that he ever had, that it disappeared almost immediately. I mean, he didn't fight for any of it. And that's why in that ending where it says, well, what do we do now? He has no ideas. He has nothing. He was just simply sailing through, being young and good looking, somebody who could get all the girls, but there was nothing to him. So the film is kind of fairly negative about both sides. I mean, I was thinking, I don't know whether people have seen The Best Man. It was made I think in the well, it was based on a Gore Vidal play, and of course Gore Vidal wrote the screenplay, uh, and at the heart of it is this, the guy, the bad guy, played by Cliff Robertson, but he was really an amalgam of both Nixon and Kennedy. So both very ambitious, both kind of grabbing whatever's the latest slogan, the latest cliche, and but so it was clearly both Nixon and Kennedy. The good guy, the one that you're supposed to like in the film, was played by Henry Fonda, and he was called yeah, I think his name was Russell. Yeah, is it? Yeah, Russell. Yeah, yeah. And he was obviously based on Adlai Stevenson, and that was the that's who Gore Vidal seemed to have his sympathies for. But again, you could see that at the time, people like Gore Vidal, and maybe that they didn't really see much difference between Nixon and Kennedy. Um, but admittedly, that was a little bit earlier. Um, I mean, that's why I think the candidate, if the candidate had just been taking the piss out of Crocker Jarman, I think it would have been a very mediocre film. He said, "Oh well, just some low hanging fruit," but because uh, it presented the sort of the vacuity of the new politics. I think that's why it's kind of become a classic. It's like they're all awful in their own way, and then you feel that you can always see the arc of the career of the Redford character, which is he's going to become like his father. He's at the moment he's still young and cute, but 10, 20 years time, he's going to be just like, like his father, just like Crocker Jarman, again, just spouting banalities because he ultimately doesn't really care about anything very much. I mean, notice how easily he was persuaded to run for Senate. He was supposed to be this community activist, and it only required a short meeting with that kind of sleazy political consultant to persuade him to run for Senate. So it's just, just politicians are all um, ambitious and unappealing. I think that's what made the film rather good. Anyway, Cynthia, thank you very much for your generosity. And then you go on. I think in fact, I think it's quite possible the film was explicitly made in order to sell liberal politics to the public at large. The film also feels very contrived to me due to it mostly being made by people in politics, not by people in the cinema. That's why I've come to believe the film probably helped set the stage for neoliberal takeover of American politics via Hollywood and the Dems. How else can you explain why Hollywood has become so incredibly biased in favor of the Dems? Well, it is true that Hollywood has become this bastion of liberalism. It started in the 1960s because before that you had the Hollywood screenwriters. A lot of communists among them, and then there were of course the House Un-American Activities Committee's hearings that pushed a lot of those communist writers out, and then essentially Hollywood became a very conservative place. I mean, conservative. I mean, it's what we would call conservative. At the time, you would call it Cold War liberalism. So the people who dominated Hollywood, say in the 1950s, after all the communists had been pushed out, where they made these worthy liberal films about racism, about anti-Semitism, about sort of some of the less attractive aspects of American life, but it was all done in the spirit of Cold War liberalism, which is, well, this is how we make American society better. That's how we're going to compete in the marketplace of ideas with the communists. You show, yeah, well, we accept, there are these, bad aspects of American life. Yeah, we've got racism. We've got prisons that aren't, perfect. And that was the philosophy of Cold War liberalism. But that kind of died out in the 1960s, and particularly when there was a lot of bitterness. You remember in Hollywood, after the House Un-American Activities Committee's hearings, and after the creation of the blacklist, which means that anyone who had been suspected of being a communist couldn't get work in Hollywood. So there's a lot of bitterness in Hollywood about the blacklist. And in the 60s, that was lifted. And so there was a reaction set in against the blacklist and the people who instituted the blacklist. I think it was kind of, basically since then, it's been dominated by liberals. But I just don't quite agree with you about that the candidate is a celebration of the new politics. Because I don't think what's the name, McKay, McCain, McKay, the Redford character. I don't think he's presented in a very flattering way. It's as I say, it's true that the Crocker Jarman comes across as very unappealing. But on the other hand, I mean, you could say it may be based on he's based on Nixon. It could also be based on Reagan. I mean, Reagan was the governor of California at the time, very, very popular as governor, but he was obviously much more savvy, as a media and a political figure than kind of the absurd role cast by Crocker Jarman. So I don't know. I feel that it's mostly negative about both sides. I mean, it's not as though the film actually thinks that now that Redford is in Washington, now that he's the senator from California, he's actually going to do anything, that he's actually going to make anyone's life better. He's now part of the machine. He's there, that's it. I mean, I guess, you could take that further and think that the film is a kind of a leftish film. It's a kind of, it sort of takes the view that, well, they're all bad. They're all selling out the people. They're selling out the community. So, the moment you get into the system, you just become the system. So therefore, this young, idealistic, good-looking guy, it gets scooped up by the system, and then forgets about the community activism that he was from. So I guess you could say that it's a sort of a leftish critique of politics, of the sort of the of liberals. That liberals sell us out. Whether it's Hubert Humphrey or whether it's anyone else. They talk a good game, but the moment they're in power, they forget about the little guy. I mean, so I guess it's a sort of leftish film, but it's not a liberal film. It doesn't exactly admire establishment liberalism, and that you could say that that is in the spirit of the 60s, where they despised establishment liberalism. They as represented by somebody like Hubert Humphrey, but even like the guy Eugene McCarthy in 1968. So So I think it's I'd say it's a kind of a leftish critique of you know old-fashioned liberalism. Anyway, but thank you very much, Cynthia. Thank you for your generosity. Stone River, thank you so much, Stone River. What do you make of the timing of Assange's release, assuming it happens, coming just before the debate? I think it's very much tied to the debate. I think it puts Trump in a very difficult position because there's no question that fake Tapper, as Trump's like to call him, he's going to ask a question about this, and Biden will come across as a decent, generous, understanding figure, someone who cares about the First Amendment, someone who cares about journalism, and who's humane. He said, this guy's been in prison now for years and years. I mean, be humane. And what does Trump say? What good arguments does Trump have? I mean, is he going to walk into the trap and say, "Oh, that I don't think Assange should have been released because he damaged national security, he damaged institutions." The FBI and the CIA are still reeling from the disclosures of Assange. He can't, if he does that, then I think he's done. I think it's going to be an absolute disaster. He's cooked. His goose will then be cooked, because then everyone's just going to abandon Trump and say, Trump just sounds like Mike Pence. I don't think Trump will do that. But then what does Trump say? He can say, well, I agree with you, Joe. I think you did the right thing to release him. He could then say, but I think you should have done it earlier. To which, of course, Biden will say, yeah, but you had every opportunity to do it. And if it was your Justice Department that indicted him, you could have pardoned him when you were in power. You didn't do it. I at least, where I didn't pardon him, I at least ordered his release. So there's no good response that Trump can make. I mean, I guess he can say, okay, well, I will pardon him when I'm in power. I mean, that would be a response, but it's not going to do him that much good. I mean, I think that will probably be his best response. Yeah, I agree with what you did, and I will pardon him when I'm in power. I hope he does that, but I'm kind of afraid that he might get trapped into attacking Assange and saying somehow, oh, well, he endangered national security, which I think is what Biden is hoping Trump will do, because then a lot of libertarians are going to absolutely, once and for all, abandon Trump. So I think it works very well for Biden. And as I said earlier, an issue that should have worked for Trump has now been taken away from him, and the issue of Assange has been taken out of the election. So I think it makes a lot of sense for Biden. And again, as I said earlier, I think that it just shows that the Democrats know how to play politics ruthlessly. If Trump were president, Trump would not have done it. He just wouldn't have done it. Yeah, and that he just wouldn't have done it. Wouldn't have had the courage to do it. Anyway, Cynthia goes on. Another thing, George, John Tunney's successful Senate race in 1970 against GOP incumbent George Murphy also served as an inspiration for the film. Since Tunney also had JFK's good looks, he was the basis of Redford's character as well. Oddly enough, Senator Murphy was most famous for creating the candy desk. And then we got a picture of the candy desk, see below, which is still being used today by Republicans on the Senate floor. Yeah, that's very interesting. And now, John Tunney was the son of boxer Gene Tunney. And this goes back a long way. But Gene Tunney, of course, was famous as being the man who defeated Jack Dempsey. He fought Jack Dempsey twice and beat him pretty easily both times. No one really thought that he could do it. I mean, Jack Dempsey had a reputation of being this ferocious fighter. No one could, he was a sort of the Mike Tyson of his day. And Tunney was much more of a kind of, he's a boxer. He used the skills of a boxer. He wasn't a street fighter. So nobody really thought Tunney would win. But Tunney, as I say, they fought twice. Tunney won pretty easily both times. But the one thing that the fights were kind of famous for was the long count, which happened during the second fight, which was that Dempsey put Tunney down, but then Dempsey didn't go to his corner in the way that you're supposed to when you're boxing. You're not supposed to, hang over the fighter who was gone down. And because, Dempsey wouldn't go to his corner, essentially the referee didn't begin the count, but only when he managed to get Dempsey to the neutral corner did the referee begin the count. So altogether, Tunney basically got about, I think, 19 seconds and gave him a nice opportunity for a rest. And so there's been a lot of controversy over the years about the long count, and that somehow, again, people just didn't like Gene Tunney as a boxer. He was just not an exciting boxer. He used his skills rather than, people like sluggers. It's like like Mike Tyson. I mean, Mike Tyson didn't have great skills. He was just a slugger, but people like sluggers. They want someone who just got a big punch and knock the guy out. But anyway, that was Gene Tunney. So his son, John Tunney, then went to became a senator. And you're right, Cynthia, that the character was based on Tunney. But it's funny that George Murphy himself had been a movie actor, and wasn't a great movie actor, but he had been, and he was kind of a jovial figure. But it's very interesting what you just said. You said Tunney also had JFK's good looks. But the thing is that JFK didn't have good looks. He really wasn't. I mean, if you look at his face, he was an Irishman. I mean, it's like you see, you look at Irishman. It's a classic Irishman's face, and he didn't have good looks. I mean, JFK did have that's where the phrase, the term was coined, which is charisma. He had that charisma. He had that patrician, self-deprecating humor. He had a certain style about him, and he was constantly in pursuit of women. I think that's what he got. I mean, he was a pretty decent speaker. But I think, he had that, and even when you see him with the crowds, he always has that smile, that sort of shy smile. The way he had his hands in his pockets and everything. It was there was certainly something appealing about him. But what he didn't have were good looks. I mean, you just look at his face. It's just an Irishman. I mean, there have been politicians who have been handsome, but JFK, wasn't one of them. Now, Redford, I agree. Redford definitely, had looks, but Kennedy didn't, and Murphy didn't either. But anyway, but that was, because we're talking about that, the constant womanizing that the Redford character engaged in that film, I think, was based on JFK. I mean, that was, it was a constant feature of his life. I mean, so, and again, that's what he's going to do. I mean, that, for the rest of his career, when he's going to be reelected to the Senate, every 6 years, that's how he's going to live his life. Um, and then Cynthia goes on. The only reason I mentioned the comment about the GOP candy jar is because the scene in the film showing media consultant Howard Klein hammering rock candy at his desk may indeed be the filmmaker's way of poking fun at Republicans and their candy disc. That's an interesting. That's an interesting. It's it's funny. I mean, I didn't realize it was candy that he was doing. Somehow when I saw him hitting with the hammer, I just assumed it was walnuts. But you're right. I mean, you look more carefully than I did. I just assumed, well, what else would he be hammering? But yeah, therefore I thought, he must be hammering walnuts. But yeah, it was candy. So yeah. I'm sure you're right that was a kind of a joke, an inside joke. Iskander Magno says, any more questions for me, George, about Biden's dementia? I'm a physician and former neurosurgery resident. Well, that's very interesting because you made you put in an absolutely excellent, succinct analysis of Biden's condition, and I was just wondering how you come to know so much about this. So the fact that you're a physician and a former neurosurgery resident, that explains it. I don't know. I mean, I think what you said was I think very pertinent, which is that people like that, people who are suffering from dementia, have good days, bad days, and if you take enough drugs, you can be on for a couple of hours. But of course, in the end, the effect wears off, and I would imagine that's what's going to happen about this. But I guess then the question that I would have, I mean, we've now been talking today about the issue of Julian Assange, and I presented my thesis that this was a very smart move by Biden. It gets the issue off the table. It prevents Trump from using Assange against him. It's going to get people on Biden's side who might otherwise be tempted not to vote, or maybe even to vote for Trump, all the kinds of libertarians or radicals within the party. So I think, it's a win-win for Biden. So I guess my question is, that's really smart thinking. Really smart thinking. Could Biden himself, given his condition, is he capable of thinking that smartly? Or do you think it's somebody else, somebody who's just manipulating things behind the scene who's doing this? So that I don't know. I mean, it's like, I understand the point. Yeah, you can get him on the debate stage. You can get him onto a platform. And he can perform for a couple of hours. But is he capable of thinking that far ahead, analytically, intellectually, strategically? As on this Assange thing, I don't know. That could, maybe that's something you could answer. And let's go back. Summer Petrus, latest sunset of the year was today. Huh. So that was the sunset. Okay. All right. Well, maybe then it was just in my imagination that the day's already getting brutally short. That's how it seemed to me. but maybe it's just my pessimism. Once you're pessimist, you're absolute. God, this is a really short day. But it's like, because I'm and anticipating the shortness of the days. But so you're saying that today was the longest day of the year. All right. Well, at least so we'll know that tomorrow, at least when tomorrow I'll complain, whoa, that was a really short day. At least I'll be correct. Anyway, Lynn says, just past our winter solstice and heading back to summer down under. Sorry to add to your depression, George. Yeah, that is kind of depressed, but congratulations that at least you're heading towards summer, even as we head out. So good for you. Cynthia says, George, I recall you recently saying that one thing Biden's got going for himself is that he's ruthless. Yep. Which got me thinking of the American film noir Ruthless, starring Zachary Scott and Sidney Greenstreet. It's about a nice guy who starts out poor, but as he becomes richer, the more ruthless he becomes in all aspects of life. Well, that's, I don't think I've seen that film. Or if I have, then I don't remember it. That's kind of that sounds interesting. I'm going to take a look at that. Also, Cynthia, any thoughts on the what might be a good theme for next week's film? I thought of maybe, and I don't know anyone else will find it appealing. Maybe we could pick on a film about organized labor, about trade unions, strife at the workplace. I mean, I know we've got obviously on the waterfront would be one possibility. Another possibility would be a British film, very good, actually, very good British film, The Angry Silence. Then, of course, there's the I'm All Right, Jack would be another one, also from Britain. That's a comedy. And then there was a film made in the 1970s, Blue Collar, with everyone will know who I'm talking about, the Richard Pryor, which I thought was a quite a good film. But anyway, I don't know what people think about on that sort of topic. Anyway, so but I'm that would be interesting. Zachary Scott and Sidney Greenstreet. So yeah, thank you for the suggestion. R. Brown, 1958, says Trump has screwed up on vaccines. Absolutely screwed up on vaccines. He could easily say, look, I was just swept up by the crisis. We didn't know what the hell we were doing. And I was listening to Fauci. I'm not a scientist. Fauci purports to be a scientist. He was telling me this, and I listened to him. What am I supposed to do? I listen to experts. That's one thing. But then you can say, yeah, but I was wrong. We were wrong on the vaccines. But he hasn't done that, and I think that's a failing on Trump's part, because he's still boasting about that he pushed for the vaccines. And he had so he screwed up on the vaccines. Yes, he had the perfect opportunity 2 years ago to pivot away from the rollout with a reasonable rationale. His base, including me, is ticked off that he clings to the 2020 rationale. I absolutely agree with you. Absolutely agree with that. I think you can say, yeah, we were wrong in 2020. We didn't know what was happening. We were subjected to the disinformation campaign emanating from China, which was, you remember they were pushing out those ridiculous, those I don't know what you'd call them, those little videos about people dropping dead on the streets and everything. And, so we panicked and then rushed this through. But given what we know now about the excess deaths and the fact that it was no vaccine whatsoever, it was a fraud, and that he should say this. But for him to continue to say, oh, I did this whole thing back, and then try to limit his thing. Oh, well, I'm against the vaccine mandates. Well, you roll this out as this lifesaver. So, the mandates were going to come anyway the moment you say, oh, this is going to save your life. So yeah, I absolutely agree. I think he really blew it with the vaccines. And Cynthia goes, as to what kind of a theme we can do for movie night next week, how about government police corruption in cahoots with corrupt businesses or businessmen, whether it involves whistleblowers or not? Chinatown obviously comes to mind. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Here are some others. V for Vendetta, good. I think you meant not the conservation, the conversation, 1974. That's a good film. And Z or Z, 1969. That's good. They're good. Good selections. Good selection. I like that. But then yeah, I think the corruption. Um, yeah. Yeah, I think Chinatown is really one of the one of the best. I mean, as I say, I mean Polanski has never really been my favorite director. I think I mean he made some pretty good films, but he made some pretty lousy films. But I think Chinatown is clearly easily his best. He worked with good script writers, obviously, and good actors and so on. But that's quite a film. Or Cynthia says, or we could do a Donald Sutherland movie, which would be a way of honoring him since he died just a few days ago. Here are a few: The Day of the Locust, Don't Look Now, Invasion of the Body Snatchers. That's a good idea. I think the idea of doing a kind of a tribute to Donald Sutherland, that's a good theme, because we can do all the other things about the corruption and the trade unions on another time. But since he just died, I think it's a good idea. Yeah. Day of the Locust, Don't Look Now. I mean, I could also do, I guess, Clute and MASH, and of course somebody else suggested Ordinary People, and I kind of poo-pooed that because I thought Ordinary People was just such a depressing movie. But maybe some people would like to see Ordinary People, but I just found it. This has really got me down. Anyway, Iskander says Peter actually looked like he stepped out of a Lord of the Rings movie, like Bilbo before he left the Shire. Though Peter definitely left the Shire and fought dragons. Robert, thank you very much for your generosity. Robert says, as I recall, William Binney argued that the byte rate at which the DNC server data was hacked exceeded the byte rate available with the internet technology of 2016. That's exactly what he argued, implying it must have been inside job using a thumb drive. Yeah, that's what Bill Binney said, and then all the others on that VIPS platform, they wrote a kind of a joint letter. That was Ray McGovern and various others who said, yeah, it couldn't be. There was no way that you could hack, from wherever, from Moscow, and extract that amount of information in such a short period of time. So therefore, it had to have been somebody with a thumb drive. You just insert the thumb drive into the computer and get the information out. So that's exactly the argument. And of course, they said, well, if you're going to make this claim that it was the GRU that did it, show us, the record of this extraction. Just show us, when and how was this done, so that we can see, how they could have pulled this off, extracting that amount of information in such a short period of time. And of course, they never produced anything like that. So you're absolutely right about what Bill Binney and the rest of the VIPS said. Judy says, at Turning Point USA in Detroit, Trump said he will have Ukraine settled as president-elect. He said, every time Zelensky comes to our country, he walks away with 60 billion. He's just left 4 days ago with 60 billion, and he gets home and he announces he needs another 60 billion. And so it never ends. It never ends. I will have that settled prior to taking the White House as president-elect. Got to stop it. Yes, it's true. He said those things, but he also said Zelensky is a brilliant salesman. Now, Trump, in Trump's lexicon, to say somebody's a brilliant salesman, that's a good thing. That's something that he shows his admiration. And incidentally, he's always spoken very well about Zelensky and said how Zelensky kind of helped him out in 2019 at the time of the impeachment. So you're right. I mean, he has said those kinds of things, but he's also, as I say, he said how much he likes and admires Zelensky, and above all, he's also suggested that Putin would not have dared to invade Ukraine had he been president. The implication being that Putin is really afraid of me, but Putin is not afraid of Biden. With the again, so the implication is that while I'm there, I'm going to play the whole madman theory, and that since I'm the madman and I'm capable of anything, it might intimidate Putin, and so on. So what I'm saying is that you may well be right that what he intends, what you and Viktor Orban is suggesting, that what he intends is to tell Zelensky the jig is up, no more money, no more arms. That's what he should do. That's the sensible thing to do if you're if you're an incoming president. You don't want this to hang over your presidency. However, I don't know whether that's necessarily how Trump sees himself, because if he does that, he also say, well, how will history remember me? Well, history will remember me as the man who sold out Ukraine. Again, I'm not saying that is how history will remember him. I'm not, but I'm just trying to get inside Trump's brain. How does he think? And what we call a sensible settlement, a sensible solution, which is bring this war to an end, whatever it takes, neutrality for Ukraine, ceding territory to Russia, all the rest. He might say, yeah, but then I'll be the target of historians who say Trump's the one who sold out Ukraine. Trump was weak. Even Biden was stronger than Trump. Biden held the line on Ukraine. So it's very hard to know what Trump will do. I mean, if you look at his record during his first term, he continued to promise that he was going to get out of one war after another. He never actually did it. Biden, I think that's when I said, Cynthia was talking about, I said he's ruthless, is that Biden has a certain ruthlessness. Biden actually did it. He actually went ahead and got out of Afghanistan. Trump wouldn't have done it. Trump would have just dawdled. He said, yeah, I want to get out, but, I want to do it in the right circumstances. I don't want to be the man who just gave up on Afghanistan. And he still, to this day, says, well, we shouldn't have got out of Afghanistan without keeping the base. Well, how the hell are you going to keep the base at Bagram? How the hell are you going to keep it without keeping your troops in Afghanistan? It makes no sense. But he still says, oh, we should have kept the air base at Bagram. Well, how are you going to do it? So it's like, Trump kind of wants to have it every which way. And that doesn't really work. And the same goes for, incidentally, even on the issue of Assange, because of course, say, yeah, he knows perfectly well that WikiLeaks revelations in 2016 damaged Hillary Clinton, and that obviously helped him, even if that wasn't the intent of WikiLeaks, but it obviously helped him. So he was very, remember when he said, I love WikiLeaks in 2016. And then once he's in power, he kind of sees WikiLeaks and Assange as, well, they're people who are undermining America. They're kind of anti-American. They're making our country weak. I can't be seen with them. I can't support them. So it's like, the issue of the deep state, Trump said, oh, I hate the deep state, until, of course, he turns around and says, I like the deep state. So when you think of, like, again, with Assange, we know all the things that Pompeo has said about Assange. And we know Pompeo tried to have him assassinated. And yet there's been never any falling out between Trump and Pompeo. In fact, Trump is clearly suggesting that Pompeo will be part of his national security team. Now, so I'm not saying Trump's going to do this or Trump's going to do that. I'd say it's up in the air. We don't know, how it's going to go. I just wouldn't be particularly optimistic. But if he doesn't bring this war to a very swift conclusion, then the Democrats are going to say it's his war. Boom. Just like they did with Nixon, in 1969 when he became president. Boom. Vietnam is Nixon's war. And, even now, people who remember that time, you say, oh, yeah, it was Nixon. It was Nixon's war. They forgot all everything that the Democrats had done. It was a Kennedy-Johnson war. No, it was Nixon's war. So the Democrats will absolutely turn around and blame Trump. So then you're going to have to ask, does Trump have the ruthlessness needed to bring that war to an end? I don't know. He's never shown that he has any ruthlessness. Biden has, but Trump hasn't. Anyway, R. Brown says the neutral corner rule was we're talking about boxing. Well, let's go to that. That's interesting. The neutral corner rule was initiated in 1927, a few months before the fight between Tunney and Dempsey. Dempsey forgot the change in rule, which gave Tunney extra time to get back up. Yeah. It's not clear he needed the extra time. Yeah, exactly. Extra time to beat the 10 count. I'm impressed by the breadth of your knowledge on so many topics. You should go and check. Yeah, you're absolutely right. That change in the rule about the neutral corner happened really just before the fight, and that's why Tunney was somewhat confused. Dempsey was confused about it. And you're absolutely right in what you're saying, that Tunney was clearly just taking a breather. You could see he was resting. Because he was such a smart fighter, he knew, if you get knocked down, you use the opportunity to rest. You don't just jump right back up. You use the opportunity. So he knew what was going on. So he used the opportunity to rest. It wasn't because, he was down and out for 19 seconds. Absolutely, Tunney was just resting. But the point is that Tunney won those two fights pretty easily. I think he won every single round of both fights, with the exception of the round when Dempsey put him down. So I think there were 10-round fights. So of the 20 rounds, I think Tunney won 19 of the 20 rounds. But nonetheless, that was the legend was created of the long count. It's funny that Gene Tunney then emerged in the 1960s to condemn Muhammad Ali, because Muhammad Ali was famously said he refuses to fight in Vietnam. And then Gene Tunney and I think Dempsey, they became very close friends. Tunney, Dempsey, and I think Jackie Robinson, they all came forward and absolutely condemned Ali for his lack of patriotism, for refusing to serve his country. This country that has done so much for Ali, that he refuses to serve and to fight for his country. So, but I remember, there was Tunney and Dempsey and Jackie Robinson all condemning Ali. Anyway, Iskander talking about my questions about Biden. He says patients at the level of dementia are capable of stereotype behavior, especially if they are hardwired behavior that they have practiced for decades. For example, a carpenter in his 70s can pick up a saw and start cutting, but he would need help with design, measurements, and implementation. But if you passed by his garage and saw him cutting, you might think, oh, his dementia is not bad. But that's very interesting, because the one thing, if you thought, well, somebody has dementia, and then he starts sawing using a saw, you think, no, don't do it. You just don't want to, because you're afraid that something bad is going to happen, because he might not be able to take the kinds of precautions that you're supposed to take when you're using a saw. It's like when you have people who have dementia, you don't want them around the gas stove. Like, oh well, I'm just going to cook dinner, and you think, no, don't do anything, because you might just simply turn the gas on, and then put your hand on the gas stove, not realize how hot it is. So I don't know. I don't know. It's if you have dementia, you're pretty much precluded from. I mean, it depends on, obviously, on the seriousness, but you'd be precluded from doing most of the things, and again, the day-to-day life, when we do so many things day to day, which we don't think about, but obviously are quite dangerous. I mean, we go out, we cross the street, and we know how to do it. We're already hardwired how to cross a street and not get knocked over by a car. But you kind of wonder, though, again, if you have serious dementia, can you do that? It's like, can you use a saw? Can you cook dinner? Can you cross a street without seriously endangering yourself? And look, I mean, and you see it incidentally on the streets, when somebody is just doing something insane, an elderly person just begins crossing. He's not even looking as to whether the cars are coming or anything. So, but I guess that's a severe case. But I think, as you noted in your contribution, he's getting very good medical attention and getting medication, whereas a lot of the time when you see people who have dementia, they're not getting good medical care, and that's why they're doing strange things, like they suddenly start crossing the street without bothering to check whether cars are coming. But that's the advantage that he has. He's obviously getting good attention. Anyway, Robert says Alex Jones uses the term pig-headed to describe Trump, and briefly turned against Trump after Trump stuck by his advocacy of the vaccines in the face of mountains of excess death data. Yeah. That doesn't surprise me. Is Jones still? I mean, what's Jones's view now on Trump? I mean, is he supportive of Trump? I mean, obviously he hates Biden, but what are his feelings about Trump? Pig-headed is I think a right way to do it. Trump seems not to have. I don't know, and not he has a difficulty just admitting, okay, I got it wrong. I mean, you can get a lot of things wrong. There's no shame in being wrong. I mean, you were struck by something that people didn't understand, this pandemic, and you did what you did while you had these supposedly great minds advising you. So you can't blame yourself. But he refuses to say, I got it wrong. And he refuses to even say anything negative about Fauci. Fauci, incidentally, who has never hesitated in being negative about Trump. Never hesitated. And then, anyway, Iskander says, I will add that the course of dementia, particularly Alzheimer's dementia, is very standardized and easily recognized by the average family physician and certainly by neurologists. It is commonly known that a history of intellectually stimulating work and high baseline IQ slows the course of the decline. This is what we see in professionals who are going through dementia in their retirement years. However, lay people, for example, a former retailer worker, would have a more accelerated rate. Well, that's, I know, I mean, that's similar to what you wrote, but it's very funny because we don't normally think of Biden as as having a high baseline IQ. Maybe you're right. Um, but I guess being a senator and learning how to speak in public, learning how to engage in debate, and so on. I mean, that kind of makes your brain, it stimulates your brain to do that. But the thing is that I saw a little bit. I can't remember where I saw it. Maybe it was on YouTube or whatever, about Clarence Thomas and Biden. This was during the Thomas hearings, and Biden was who of course was the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, and of course it was a horrific, terrible hearings. It was the Anita Hill hearings, and Thomas obviously hates Biden for permitting Hill to come on and start throwing out all those accusations against Thomas. But there was a moment there where Biden was being kind of friendly and smarmy towards Thomas. That's how he used to be. Very, very, kind of smarmy, very articulate, definitely articulate. And he started going on and on about natural law. And I seem to remember at the time also thinking, why is he talking about natural law? I mean, what the hell's he got to do with anything? And he talks and talks and talks, and the way it works at these hearings is that senators or congressmen, they talk and talk and talk, and the witness is just supposed to sit there and listen and listen and listen, and that's what he was with Thomas. And then, but this was a kind of I guess this was a clip from some longer film, and then the person who's interviewing Thomas, this is obviously many years later, he asked, well, what did you think of it when Biden was talking to you about natural law? And so, well, who the hell knows? I have no idea. When you go before these hearings, you have to sit there and listen, and you have absolutely no idea what the senators or the congressmen are actually talking about. And they don't have any idea what they're talking about, but you have to sit there and patiently listen as if and say, nod your head. And he said, no, Biden really didn't mean anything in what he was going on about natural law. And then Thomas said something like, I think what he was trying to do was to extract from me something about my views on abortion. That's what he was trying to. That's why he was bringing up natural law. But I didn't walk into the trap, and that may be. But I'm just saying this, that Biden never struck me as being a person of high IQ, but he knew how to talk. He knows how to be articulate. He knows how to be a successful politician. He's a good glad hander, backslapper. He knows how to raise money. And I don't know. And maybe if you're obviously somebody with a medical neurological background, you say, yeah, but that's all that kind of stimulates the mind and helps stave off dementia, and that maybe so. However, Biden seems to have a very bad case of it. It's just and he's not that old. I mean, he's in his 80s, but again, it's not unusual to come across people in their 80s who are far sharper, far more cogent, and physically much more vigorous than Biden is. Anyway, we go back. Iskander again goes on. The issue that is so perplexing for you and any other viewer observing Biden is how this man is capable of having dementia and president of the USA. Ultimately, this is a function of his above average IQ. Okay, all right. I mean, you say that he is a man of above average IQ. We have those things. We used to have those IQ tests. They don't do them anymore. Those have all been banned. But I can't believe that if we gave him an IQ test, those IQ tests that they used to have, that he would do well. But I don't know. Maybe this better than I do. But I just find it difficult to think that he would do those kinds of the things that those IQ tests we used to test. But yeah, I agree about the excellent medical care and the 24-hour supervision by many attendants and blah, blah. But again, he looks in a bad way for a man who's 81. 81 is not that old by today's standards. People now, many people now reach 81. It wasn't the case 20, 30 years ago, but now it's a common thing that people reach, and there are they are able to function a lot better than he does. Cynthia said, like the idea of a trade union blue collar film, especially if you or anyone else can suggest a British one. Yeah, I've suggested a couple of ones, but the the one with The Angry Silence and I'm All Right, Jack. So one is a kind of a grim film, very really bleak one, but I'm All Right, Jack is very entertaining. And then Iskander says, someone in the condition of ultimately the perfect tool for someone needing to control the presidency, and that is why they're keeping him around. Eventually, however, they will have been told that he is an expiry date and that is a very close based on accelerated rate of events or screw-ups. He will need to be replaced by another tool. The problem, and I think I've said this before, is if you replace him, and I guess once the election is done, and let's say he's re-elected, then I think he can be replaced. He'll be replaced by Harris. Harris, again, she won't be that difficult to control. She's not especially bright, and there'll be people on hand to run her. But you can't. But if you try to replace him before the election, I think that's going to be really problematic, because I don't think there's anyone that you can replace him with and hope to do well in the election. Michelle Obama was not, that's not going to work. It's not going to fly. She doesn't have any political experience. Gavin Newsom, he's never done this. He's never run for national office. People don't necessarily love California, to say the least. The most likely person that you could replace him with is Hillary Clinton, because she's run twice. She can certainly make a case. I deserve it because I came close to winning the presidency twice, and therefore I'm more qualified than anyone else to replace Biden. She will make that case. Whether that's actually going to get the Democrats over the line, that's a different issue. So I suspect their calculation is that Biden will win. That is as long as they keep him locked up, the people don't see much of him, or occasionally, they wheel him out. He's pumped up with drugs, and then they wheel him back in after a couple of hours. That'll be enough to get the Democrats over the finish line. And then once he's been reelected, then they can replace him, and they'll have to replace him with Harris. There's no one else. But they don't really care, because Harris is not going to create any problems. She'll be happily manipulated by others. Anyway, Iskander says, by the way, cholinesterase inhibitors are commonly prescribed for people with nearly all types of dementia, and they work on a variable course for different patients. Use of testosterone and other stimulants, however, is forbidden in dementia patients and would be against standard care. You would lose your license. Like that cardiologist who used propofol, anesthetic drug, to help Michael Jackson sleep. He lost his license. Okay. Summer Petra says, it appears my film suggestion for the resurrection of Zachary Wheeler has been poo-pooed. No, it has not been poo-pooed. No, I'm gonna I'm gonna see what else we can combine it with to do a poll. So as a theme. But definitely we're gonna keep that. Yeah, the resurrection. I've got it. I've got it here written down. The resurrection of Zachary Wheeler. Definitely, we're gonna consider that. Cynthia goes on and say, and again, but Jeopardy. I should go on Jeopardy. God. Iskander says, actually, the opposite happens. Family members are delighted when family members use the stove and practice their old jobs or hobbies, no matter how dangerous. They see them practice these stereotype behaviors and get excited. Oh, he's not sick and there's no dementia. Then they will go to their doctors and say, no, my loved one is not sick and does not have dementia. He was in the garage cutting wood like he used to just yesterday. Then the cholinesterase inhibitors are given and they have a few more good years. However, then ultimately, the drugs stop working, as they will eventually do for all dementia patients, and their disease progresses. As their disease, and suddenly the patient cannot do anything. Then the family goes to the doctor and says, "Oh my God, he was doing so well, but what happened? Is there another drug?" And then the sad truth settles, and the patient is committed to long-term care home in a few months. The same is happening with Biden, but he's president of the USA. Well, okay. I think it's clear that they know his condition is deteriorating, and the calculation is, well, what's really important is that the Democrats win in 2024, and they felt they didn't think anybody else was going to win in 2020 other than Biden, and they figure none of the others are going to win in 2024 other than Biden, and so they're going to keep him around until the election. They can see all of these symptoms like we all can, but they think it hasn't done him that much harm. He's not doing that badly in the polls. He's behind, but it's still within the statistical margin of error. Skander says his IQ is around 140, not 100, but certainly not 160 or 180. I just meant he's not a layperson IQ. All right. While Richard Nixon seemed to, and then Robert says, while Richard Nixon seemed to have a very high IQ, I never would have suspected Biden of having one. I'm kind of in agreement with that, because the one thing that you notice whenever you watch these interviews with Nixon is that he gives very thoughtful answers. He's asked a question, and he answers the question. In other words, he understands the question that Ted Koppel or Harrison Salisbury is asking him. He understands it, and he answers that question, and he answers it really. He's thinking about it, and that's why you think, well, he has a high IQ, because he knows how to answer a question, and to do it cogently. And with Biden, he has no ability to answer questions. He has no ability even to understand questions. He just sort of throws around kind of meaningless phrases. You got that, Jack? And if you're not voting for Biden, you ain't black. And the Skander says age is not the cause of dementia. No, that's true. Dementia is caused by a disease process like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and Huntington's. Yeah. Vascular, blah, blah. Age is not the cause. No. Certainly you can have a healthy 100-year-old with a sharp mind who avoided all these illnesses. Average IQ is 100. like a nurse, 120 civil engineer, 135. Um, and there's but a good family physician. 140 is the threshold for higher intelligence. There you got the electrical engineer, decent politician. Wow, I never thought of Biden at that level. I really don't. I just find this difficult because even when you go back to the days when he was younger and a lot more articulate, as I said, when he was up with Clarence Thomas, he was talking gibberish. It was just gibberish. Just watch that thing as it talks about natural law. It's just gibberish. None of it makes any sense at all. So, yes, he was articulate. He knew how to construct sentences. He knew how to speak, which I guess you have to as a politician. But what he was saying was just rubbish. So that's why I still have difficulties accepting that he was that he has this IQ of 140. Anyway, Stone River says, "Can Nixon ever be rehabilitated by history?" Well, as I think we were saying yesterday on the Gaggle in our live stream, most of the historians are liberals, and they have an agenda. Their agenda is always that the right in America is the source of all of America's problems. Republicans are terrible. If only Republicans had been prevented from enjoying power. So they're always very nasty about Nixon because that's part of their worldview. That's part of how they understand American history. So therefore, as they think about post-war America, they think, what are the bad things? Well, what are the bad things about post-war America? Oh, the Republicans took the House in 1946. Oh, and all these terrible things. That people like Nixon were elected into the House, and then they had the House Un-American Activities Committee, and they all started persecuting these good liberals. And so they, that's how they you have to continue to create this thing of the good guys and the bad guys, and so you say, well, how did we get into Vietnam? Wasn't really Kennedy and Johnson? Weren't they the ones who got America? I mean, of course, America was involved in Vietnam, but after all, the Republicans had been fairly restrained in their in their involvement in Vietnam. The escalation was came under Kennedy and Johnson. So how do you explain that? Oh, well, it was because the Republicans had so demonized liberals that liberals had to overcompensate in order to ward off these attacks. And besides, these horrible Republicans had purged. They'd purged the State Department of the experts, the people who could have provided expertise on Vietnam. They'd all been pushed out, and so we just didn't know enough about Vietnam, and that's how we got there. And so it's part of that history making is that Republicans, and of course Nixon. It has to be Nixon because Nixon obviously was the most prominent and leading Republican politician since World War II, and so he's always at the heart of it. And so they have to, at each point, oh yeah, it was because of this, the anti-communism. Nixon was part of that anti-communism. Of course, it's all crap. The anti-communism, the purges of the communists was all instituted by Harry Truman, Hubert Humphrey in the Senate. But they don't want to accept that. They think, oh, they just did it under pressure from Republicans. And then they have to go then gain, when it comes to Vietnam, and say, oh, well, Nixon was sabotaging Lyndon Johnson. Lyndon Johnson was really trying to get America out of Vietnam in 1968 and Nixon sabotaged it. It's absolute, utter nonsense. Johnson could have got America out of Vietnam much, anytime beforehand. Um, and, he was using his supposed negotiations in 68 as a way to keep the Democrats in power. He was a lame duck. He was a lame duck president. He didn't have a mandate any longer to make foreign policy decisions. He had an opportunity early in 68 to run for president, to run for re-election. He didn't do it. He ducked the chance. He was afraid of running against Bobby Kennedy. The moment Bobby Kennedy got into the race, Johnson got out. So he was a lame duck, and so an attempt to somehow blame it all on Nixon, but that it has to be part of that bestiary. The bestiary is that Nixon somehow sabotaged. Oh, the war could have ended in 68 if only Nixon hadn't sabotaged. But of course, it's all complete nonsense, because the South Vietnamese knew perfectly well there was an election in 68. So why should the South Vietnamese make any compromises with Washington when they knew that Johnson will be gone within a few weeks? Why should they do anything? Why should they? I mean, that's what a lame duck is. When you're a lame duck, you don't have any clout. But this obvious point is missed, because all these historians continue to say, well, somehow Nixon was this monster, this horrible, horrible person who sabotaged the the wonderful attempt in 68 to get America out of Vietnam. So when you say, will there be a proper reckoning? Well, there probably will be among independent figures, like we here at the Gaggle, but even people like Glenn Greenwald, who look and say, hey, Nixon was a mark above today's politicians. He talked about peace. He talked about cooperation. He talked about peaceful coexistence with the Soviet Union. However much we don't like communism, and again, no one's going to say Nixon liked communism. However much we don't like communism, he thought it's a lot better to live in peace and prosperity than to wage a war. I see somebody, Hugh Keenan says, by the time George looks at our chat, his stream will be ending. All right, I've been looking at locals. Yeah. All right, let me go back. I mean, just, all right. I want to talk about, let's see if I can go. So I'm back on the Rumble studio page. So let me see if I can get to some of the things that I haven't got to. Go on. All right. Okay. So then, Hugh Keenan says, publisher target hostages apropos Assange. Hopefully he'll be left alone and free to speak. I think he will be. I don't think the Australian government's going to go after him, and I don't think that it's in their interest to make difficulties for him. Hugh Keenan says the UK election is coming up. Coincidence? I think it's a very interesting as to what's going to happen in the. I mean, I don't think the Assange thing has anything to do with the UK election. I think the Americans are the ones who are calling the shots. The UK is just an also ran. I think they're not important in any of this. So I don't think the UK election played any part. Because the British would just do whatever the Americans wanted them to do. Wolfgang Felix, that's a good name. If the blue team really wanted to get Trump, they wouldn't be running a senile old man, all that judicial work for nothing. Well, as I say, yes, he's a senile old man, but he's still the Democrats' best choice, for winning. I mean, they don't really have anyone who's a kind of a vote winner. it's I mean, that was the decision that was made in 2020 by Obama. He said, well, if we don't have Biden, then we're going to have um, Warren or Sanders. There's no way that either of them can win. Pete Buttigieg, there's no way that Buttigieg can win. We could have billionaire Bloomberg. There's no way people aren't going to vote for Bloomberg. So they said, well, Biden's our best bet. 4 years up, it's still Biden is your best bet. You don't have anyone that you can just bring out from the back room and say, hey, this is a more likely chance. So that's why I think they can get over the finish line with Biden, and then I think after the election he'll be pushed aside. Like, well, I mean, FDR died a few months after he was reelected in 1944, so he died early 45. So it'll be something something of the sort, and then they'll put Harris in. Interesting though, if Harris is Harris takes over as president, whom will Harris nominate as VP? That's a kind of an interesting one. I wouldn't be surprised if the party pushes Harris to nominate Hillary Clinton as her VP. Then it could be that within a few months Hillary Clinton will be president. Anyway, let's see. Roll fanning points to rail fanning. God, this lettering is so tiny, it's so hard to see. Rail fanning points. Trump was a fool for not pardoning Assange. I agree. As I said, I give him some slack for not doing it after he was impeached the second time, because I think he was then fighting for his life, and he needed all the Republican votes he could get. So I understand why he didn't do it then, but he should have done it earlier. Ray J says Tucker Carlson is in Australia just now. I wonder if he has an interview planned. I doubt it. I think Assange isn't going to give any interviews for a while. I mean, first of all, I think he's going to have to probably check into a hospital. They're going to see what ailments he has. I think he's going to need time to recover. I really doubt that he's going to be giving any interviews. Ronald Bargery says, if Assange says Seth Rich was the source, it causes a real problem for the DNC because it means they murdered him. Well, I agree, and that's why if he does disclose it, and he may, because he may think that most of his problems stem from when the Democrats turned on him, and they turned on him because of the DNC revelations, and they blamed him for their defeat in 2016. That's why, again, Trump was a fool to play along with that. He should have seen that Assange was somebody that is a good person to have around. He's not doing anything to harm him, Trump, unlike these people like Christopher Steele and the rest of them. So Trump, he should have seen Assange was someone who was on his side. So I think it's a very foolish step by him. Anyway. Ed Nelson says he didn't pardon him because, as he said, it wasn't time yet. Yeah. That's the kind of thing Trump would say. Like, we'll see what happens. Rail Fanning says Trump is a fool for agreeing to a rigged debate. he has learned nothing. I have to agree with you. I think it's the notion that he, Trump, can, through the force of his personality, prevail um, in a game, the rules of which are rigged, shows he has learned nothing. No, if the rules of the game are rigged against you, you are going to lose. And he should have learned from what happened to him during his administration. The rules were rigged, and he suffered for it. The rules were rigged in the election. They literally rigged the rules in the election, and he suffered for it. This debate is going to work absolutely against him. We know Dana Bash, fake tapper. They have no sympathy at all for Trump, and they're gonna help him out. I mean, he saw what happened with Chris Wallace in 2020. It was Chris Wallace was there to screw Trump over. For him to think that he can get by just through, hey, I can do anything by because of my charm and winning personality. No, that's not how it works. Anyway. All right. So, Hugh Keenan says George depressed, Scotland 0, Hungary 1. That was definitely a good night. But of course, we still have to see whether Hungary will go through to the next round. So anyway, JFK Sutherland cameo. Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, okay. Land, air, and sea machines. Hey, George, let me know if you stopped by Ireland. I just got your book, Bombs for Peace, and I'd like to have it signed maybe. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Absolutely. If I go to Ireland, I'll absolutely get in touch with you. Where in Ireland are you based? Hugh Keenan asks, are most of us here from UK and Ireland? Oh, that's interesting. I always assume that most of it is most of the United States, but it's great that we got we got good contingent from the old country. Again, Rail Fanning says Trump is alienating his base. Look at his great replacement, illegal alien amnesty plan for illegal aliens who attend college. I just think that's so awful. The whole idea when he says that and any foreign students, we should immediately give them a green card. I mean, it's a disgrace. I mean, what kind of an idiocy is that? Give them a green card. Well, what about Americans? You're giving them an advantage over Americans. Oh, they go through college, and then you stamp a green card to their diploma. It's an outrage. Now, he's not going to be able to get this through. There's no way the Republicans are going to accept anything. But the fact that he says something like that foreign students should have precedence over American students. I mean, they're Americans. Whether they're bright or not bright, they are Americans. And if you're to be an American president, your job is to ensure that Americans take priority over anyone else. And apart from anything else, the countries, and again, to send somebody to an American college, they're very expensive. The only way foreign students can go to American colleges if their government subsidize them. Now, their government subsidize them for a reason, namely that they're going to come back and use the skills they learned at American colleges to make their countries great. That's the whole point. So, you're in Nigeria, Nigeria's government subsidizes you in Harvard, electrical engineering or whatever, the idea is that you will then, use the electrical engineering skills that you learned at Harvard in Nigeria. That, why else subsidize, an undergraduate in an American college? So it's totally outrageous. It's basically theft. I mean, that would be just theft of money and talent from other countries. So it's totally disgusting. And your point now about the illegals, the illegal alien amnesty plan is just to attend colleges is just execrable. Yeah. Anyway, Rupert Fellow says Hillary Clinton wanted to drone Assange. Yes, she did. Yeah, she did, absolutely. Yeah. So Gildra says, bit late, but I have to say that it has not been the longest day where I am in England. Yeah. And to add to the depression, thank you, I like that, is the thought of how miserable both the presidential candidates are. That's it. Somebody with my spirit. Yes, to add to the depression. Thank you so much. Yeah, and you poo-poo the idea about the longest day. I can't argue about that, but it certainly doesn't seem like a long day here. But okay. Anyway. Rail Fanning says, strange how dementia doesn't warrant impeachment of a Democrat president. Yeah, I mean, it's true that you remember during the Trump years, there was a lot of talk about invoking the 25th Amendment about when the president is clearly incompetent to perform his duties. They were talking about Trump. Oh yeah, how about invoke him? So was that guy, that Rosenstein, that awful creature Rosenstein, who ran the Justice Department? He took part in those conversations about invoking the 25th Amendment. But in this case, when you have this special counsel, Robert Hur, saying, well, we can't really bring charges against Biden because we would never prevail. A jury would see him as a harmless old man who has difficulty, remembering what he had for breakfast that morning. Would never get a conviction. So he's too senile to face a criminal prosecution. But apparently he's on the ball and sharp when it comes to the presidency. I mean, it makes absolutely no sense. Edgar Nelson says about Biden can do it in his sleep, 50 years of muscle memory. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's muscle memory, but as I say, he looks and sounds very different from the way he looked and sounded, let's say back in the 90s when he was it's more than 30 years ago, but he looked very different. He doesn't look like that anymore. He doesn't sound like that. So as I say, back then he was never that intelligent. He was just basically talking gibberish. But you can't say it's muscle memory because he just doesn't talk the way he used to talk. Anyway. Rayo Fanning says IQ tests have been replaced with DEI requirements. Yeah, no, that's right. The IQ tests have essentially have been removed. I still did the version of an IQ test in England when they still had the 11 plus, which was a sort of an IQ test. But even then, they were kind of on the way to abolishing them. And then they retained some aspects of the IQ test in these various standardized tests that you took. I mean, the SAT, they had a little bit of an IQ test in the SAT. They had more of an IQ test in the GRE to get into graduate school, and then you had an IQ test in particularly in the LSAT to get to law school. But they've all gone. Boom. They've all been abolished. There are no IQ tests anywhere at all. So Iskander Magnus says, like Bush Jr. was like 115. I don't know. I mean, you say Biden is 140 and Bush Jr. Oh, George W. Bush. Oh, I see. Okay. I don't know. I mean, he went to good schools. He went to Harvard and Yale. I mean, Biden never went to good schools. And even in the lousy schools that he went to, he was in the bottom half of the class. You remember he made up all these stories about how he was in the top of the class at his Delaware law school. So he wasn't. He was in the bottom half of his class. Whereas Bush Jr., he was in Harvard and Yale. Now, of course, his father helped him. It helps if you have a father who was, I don't know, maybe he wasn't president yet, but nonetheless, he was an important, powerful figure in Washington. But it's hard. I just find it hard to say, well, Biden is so much smarter than Bush. So Bush went to, Ivy League schools. Biden had difficulties in the sort of mediocre colleges. So I don't know. I guess I'm still having difficulties processing the idea that he has an IQ of 140. Anyway. Hugh Keenan says, we are the cheap seats. A lot of the cheap seats there. No cheap seats. But I will say that I would encourage people who come and take part through YouTube to join our community at Locals. Please join. It's a very good deal. It's not that expensive. You get all sorts of benefits from being part of the Locals community. So, I want to make a pitch. Please join the Locals. So, so you don't feel like you're in the cheap seats. So, if you're coming on through YouTube, please go to the Gaggle, one word, .locals.com, and please join. I mean, you can join for free, but you don't get all the benefits that you would get if you pay, again, kind of a minimal subscription membership. So please do it. It makes life good for us. So when you say George doesn't like YouTube, no, I do like YouTube, but I would so much rather people join our Locals community and become participants in our Locals community, and help keep this this community going by paying the the membership fee. Anyway. Thank you for George. Not to change the talk, but this is a photo of a mini nuke called Davy Crockett, mounted on a standard U.S. Army Jeep, posted in Vietnam in '63. Oh, looks nice. Yeah. Iskander says, I would pay 10 or 20 for Locals. Peter and George are priceless. Thank you so much, Iskander. I really appreciate that. And thank you also, Iskander, for your medical insights. I mean, it's kind of raised everybody's IQ, a few notches. We were starting talking about these questions. So we're all now a lot smarter than we were, thanks to your contribution. Even if I'm not entirely convinced by your high regard for Biden's IQ. Anyway, my time is up. Thank you so much, everybody who's joined me. Thank you for all of your questions and comments and contributions. Above all, thank you so much for everybody who's chipped in with a few bucks. Thank you, Stone River. That was really, really, really generous of you. I have to face those two swine tomorrow. I call them swine, the two dogs who really, you know, have very little time for me. They think I'm doing a lousy job, and they just keep me around for entertainment value. But I have to face them, and I have to explain, well, what happened. Why you failed again. So I have to explain, what happened tomorrow. But that's my problem, my burden. We will be back Thursday, same time. Please join me, and we'll have another great discussion. So thank you. Good night. See you Thursday. All the best. Bye.